Everyone, it's Eric Goins from Flywheel Studio. Today, I want to talk about three key mistakes that we see clients making when they're developing applications. And secondly, kind of our approach to application development. Some of that's weaved in, but then also I want to simplify that process and make it really stupid simple for how we approach this and why we do that. First, we see a lot of applications where people are trying to automate or bring software into a process that exists today. And one of the biggest problems we see is that when they say, okay, I'm doing this today, they create an idea and an architecture for how they want to do this in the future. Typically, it's maybe not quite this crazy, but honestly, sometimes it is. And one of the things that we look at is we say, okay, well, what are you doing today? And they highlight some really small portion of that application and then say, but we want to do all of this. That's the first place I push back. Normally, when we're looking to introduce or replace, when we're looking to replace a software application, we're really aiming for feature parity. We don't want to add too much to it. Performing a technical migration is a job in and of itself. It's not something where we want to go add a ton of new features and complexity while migrating a bunch of data. It's better to target the existing application in a way that we can replace it while removing the technical debt, and then we can add additional features in the future and bring that up to par. Now, there might be some make or break features, okay? There might be a point to the migration, why we're migrating, and that's important that we address those and we bring those into the new architecture. But it's really important to not state the or develop to the entire long-term vision of the new application because you're going to get bogged down and it is very likely that you will make the migration more difficult and increase the probability that the migration is not successful. For example, that during the parallel run period, users' data isn't syncing properly, or people are confused when they migrate to the new system. Adding too many features makes the transition very, very difficult for users who know the platform well. So again, we normally what we do is we map those specific features that we're trying to reach parity with. And if there's a few key features that we need in order for the migration to happen, then of course we'll look at those. But overall, the goal is not to add a lot to this. It is important to know the end state and the total goal for the project. We don't want to develop something that isn't going to meet that in the long run, but that doesn't mean that we want to develop those features for the go live. The second thing that we see a lot of is people will say, okay, this is how we do this today. Let's develop an application around that. And this is kind of contrary to what I just said, but it is important to look at it at a process level. And so, if you had a sales process, you would have this step, is paperwork received? No. Okay, wait for the paperwork. Okay, then we process the paperwork. Request information, request the missing information, or proceed with incomplete paperwork if it's an urgent sale, right? All of these things you might not be doing in the future if there's no paperwork. So we want to make sure that we're not copying a bad process. Typically, when we're looking at this, we want to look at that process and say, okay, what's really important here and why does this exist, right? There might be certain checks and balances. There's, certain information that has to be provided by different individuals. We want to challenge all of those assumptions and see what we can remove. We've seen things where, the process will wait for 3 days for another team to provide information, but really that's because there were two systems that didn't talk to each other. And in the new system, both teams will have the same information. That whole waiting step, that approval step, and that review step can be removed by having the same information in the system for both teams and not requiring them to wait for each other. So we don't ever want to copy a bad process. We want to re-examine it, redo it, simplify it, and then develop an application for that. Again, there's a lot of times the what will happen is you will go and you'll say, okay, this new system, we're going to remove X, Y, and Z, we're going to create this new process, and then we're going to add all of these other steps. And that's the third thing that we see a lot of is planning ahead for things that aren't problems yet. Okay. And I'll give you some examples of this. But if a lot of people will come up with ideas about all of these different ways that users will use the application and all of the functionality that users are going to need. And you can do this to infinite levels within this. So all of a sudden it becomes, oh, if this user wants to change the date here, then we need an approval process just for the date. And if that date goes beyond 30 days, then we need to send an email to this team. But if it's over 60 days, then you need this type of approval. And we can create an infinite number of rules for everything that's happening in an application. But the only thing that's doing is making the application significantly more complex. So sometimes, again, what we're looking for is parity. We don't really want to go and create, just because we have technology, because we have a new system, because we can create these rules, doesn't mean that we necessarily should. There's a lot of ways that these things happen today outside of the system, and we often look to just continue using those the way they are today, those processes outside the system, and not necessarily bring them into the system and make the system infinitely more complex. I know that it's a difficult thing to maybe say or understand, but the point here is through all three of these things, we're trying to achieve really one overall objective. And that objective is to build a great application that comes in on time and on budget. To do that, we need to make sure that we understand the full vision, but we're not developing too much on the get-go. That's why 70% of IT projects go 70% over time and over budget. Secondly, we want to make sure that we're not copying bad processes. If we're building a new system, let's do it properly. Let's not build a system that accommodates a old or legacy process that might be manual or might exist because two systems don't talk to each other. Whatever that is, let's redesign that for the future. And then lastly, let's not add things we don't need. Okay. We can spend all day thinking of rules and processes and flags and checks and balances in applications. That's not where the real value add comes in. And it's not to say it's not important that we shouldn't have any within the application, but on the same side, we don't need an infinite number of those. There has to be some happy medium. And so we do try and find that balance. When we look at how Flywheel designs applications, I'm going to tell you this in two phases. First is we have what we call an MLP. It's a minimum lovable product, which is that MVP, the minimum viable product that looks good. Today, you cannot go out with an application that looks like a TI-84 calculator with that stupid simple interface that doesn't look like it saw the light of day in a designer's hands. You need something that looks great because consumer attention spans are so short today. So what we really look to do, and this is for a brand new product, we look to find that one feature that proves if the idea is worthwhile or not. So let's say we're building an app that's Uber for donuts, okay? The idea is here, will people pay for donut delivery? And can we build something that, has a network of drivers to perform that action? That's really the idea. Will people pay for this? Will people pay for donut delivery? And so the only things that we're trying to do are building features around donut delivery. Now, you can say, oh, I need ads for monetization. Maybe in the long run, probably. There's definitely an argument for that. But that doesn't prove whether people will pay for donut delivery or not. that does not actually prove the idea at all. And if you think about all of these rules about, oh, well, if the person doesn't open their door within, 5 minutes, then I want to charge them $5. Again, that doesn't prove whether somebody will pay for donut delivery. That's more of, hey, I want to solve this problem about the drivers waiting too long to drop off the donuts. It's not, maybe one day you will have that problem and you will need to solve that problem, but don't solve that problem before you have it. You don't need to solve and have the same rules that Uber has um, for everything, right off the get-go. We look for that one idea and then we try and make sure that all of the features and functionality that this application is going to have are just there to prove whether that idea works or not. We release that and it goes to something called hypercare. And this is where we're really attentive to make sure that users get a great experience while they're using the application. And also during hypercare, we are collecting, organizing, classifying, prioritizing feedback. Okay. Users are going to come up with hundreds, maybe thousands of ideas and recommendations and complaints and suggestions about how your application should work and what it should do. Okay. But some of that is not going to be useful. Some of that is not going to be practical, and some of it is. So if somebody says, hey, I love that you deliver donuts, I wish you also delivered eggs and milk, that might not be good advice for you. That's not directly to the core of the application. And sure, you might put that on a shelf that says, well, maybe we do want to look at what else we could deliver, but that probably doesn't mean you want to be a grocery store delivery app and that you want to go compete in the grocery store space. On the flip side, if somebody's saying, hey, all of the donuts I'm getting seem like they're yesterday's donuts and they're not very good and they're crushed, that might be good feedback that you need to go to the stores and say, hey, maybe we need some different packaging. Or hey, go to the drivers and say, hey, you need to be a little more careful. You can't just throw these at the person's door because they're getting crushed. Somebody else might say, hey, I don't know what donuts to order. I wish you had AI tell me what donuts to order. You might say, okay, that sounds like a great idea. Like that could be cool, but you might not have the engineering budget, time, or the prioritization for that. So we spend all that time going through that, and then we'll choose what features to develop. And we again go through this iteration process over and over and over. Flywheel is a little bit different than other agencies, where when we start a project, we want to start with the minimum amount. We do not try and upsell clients to add more features and more functionalities. In fact, normally I push clients to do less. I want you to spend less money up front. And so, as a general guideline, at least for our pricing as of today in 2024, I spoke to a client last week and they said their budget is $50,000 for a mobile application. I said, great. I would like you to not spend more than 25,000 on the initial build. And I want you to save half of that for ongoing future development, for at least the ongoing future. And if we can do less than half up front, that's even better. In my mind, I do not want that money up front because I want it to be spent on real features that move the needle once you have users. And I think it's really important. A lot of people don't recognize this. When you look at Airbnb, Uber, almost any application and startup out there, they did not start with what you think that they did. Instagram did not start as a photo sharing app. Uber did not start as a, car sharing, ride hailing app. Airbnb did not start the way that it is today, and Facebook did not start with a news feed with the like button. All of those things came later, and it's really important that you save the budget, the time, and the effort to do that. Now, that's for a brand new product. Let's talk about building a onto an existing product, service, or business. The first thing that we do, and I'd probably actually change the order of these a bit. The first thing that we do is we start with looking at your existing process and mapping that. Okay. And so what we'll do is we'll do a process map of your existing processes or existing systems, and then redesign it for what we want to do in the future. We'll have some brainstorming sessions to understand what that big picture idea is. And then what we'll do is say, okay, what do we need in the base of this? The V1, the MLP, what are the features that we need to go live? And then we'll prioritize the other features around that into a roadmap. We're very careful throughout that entire process to make sure we don't get bogged down adding features that do not add value. Because again, you can spend the rest of your life adding checks, balances, and features to an application that does not have any users, and that will not provide you any value. And once we do that initial release, okay, where we've decided the new process, the base features to go out, almost always if it, let's say you do 20% of your base vision and you're going to go add 80% later, 50% of that 80% that you thought you were going to do, you'll never do. In my experience, 50% will be deemed not necessary over time as you get user feedback. And you'll prioritize your user feedback over all of those initial ideas that you had, which is really critical when you think about it to let users come tell you what to build, and then you go and you build based on that feedback. And again, you will find that the ideas you had originally that you thought were so important to that product weren't as important as you really thought, and you didn't need them. If you have any questions about this, about how we approach application development, about MLPs, transitioning from one system to another, migrating from no code to visual development and FlutterFlow, just reach out to Flywheel Studio and we'd be happy to help you with that.